Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Tam here again, but this time he's going to dabble in a little math. So to help you guys out, I'm going to do a little review, or some of you it could be new, on graphing sine functions. So when it comes to graphing sine functions, so this is called graphing sine function. And when you go to graph sine functions or any kind of trigonometric function, you essentially need a couple of variables. Okay, so we're going to list it out. First thing we're going to do is write out our rule that we want to graph. So here I have 3 sine pi over 2 x plus 2 minus 1. So what I always like to do first is list out all my variables, a, b, h, and k, as well as a little note I have at the bottom here: a times b is greater than 0, or a times b is less than 0. So let's list these variables out. So a in this case is 3, b is pi over 2, h is minus 2, and k is minus 1. Now I'm going to put also next to these little letters here an order: 1, 2, 3, 4. So even though alphabetically they're going in order, numerically they're going in reverse order. You're going to see why I do that. So we're going to give ourselves a little graph here, an x and y axis, to start us off. And you got to give yourself enough room here. And you can basically fill in any number you want. You just have to make sure you accommodate for the room that you're using. So, like I said, you always start in reverse order, starting at k. So the reason I say that is because that k always determines the horizontal split of your sine or cosine function. So for this scenario, k is at -1. So I'm going to draw at -1, at y is equal to -1, a split horizontally underneath the x-axis. So that's taken care of. Then I look at my h, which determines the starting point of my x. So I go backwards: -1, -2, and I draw a vertical line going down and splitting at -2. Then, once I determine that parameter of the box, we can say we're going to next determine the period using the b. So this is how you determine the period. Period is equal to 2 pi over the absolute value of b. So in this case, you have 2 pi over 2. And it's kind of like just saying 2 divided by 1/2, which you guys know to be 4, which means that it goes from -2 all the way 4 spaces: 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it ends up at 2. And this is where my box ends along the x. And of course, the last one we're going to deal with is the amplitude. So the nice thing about the amplitude, it's actually the distance from the middle, the k, to the highest and the lowest point. So if a is 3 in this case, we're going to go up 3, 1 from the 1 here, from the k. So 1, 2, 3 to go all the way up to 2. I'm going to separate it 2 here, and I'm going to go down 3, -2, -3, and -4, and this is where I'll draw my other dotted line. So basically my graph will occur within this space right here. Now the nice thing about a sine function, it literally starts in the middle all the time. But the next thing you got to figure out is, if you take a times the b in terms of the sine, does it give you a positive or negative value? Well, in this case, a and b are both positive. So if you multiply them together, it will indeed give you a positive value, or a value that is greater than 0, which means that for a sine function, that means it's increasing. Wonderful. So it means that from my starting point, it starts to increase. Now, the nice thing about a periodic function, it goes in quarters. So in the first quarter, since it's increasing, it reaches its maximum here at 2. and then it dips back down to the K in the second quarter. In the third quarter, it gets to the lowest point at 1, and last but not least, it ends up where it started. So you have it going up and back down and back up, and there you have your cycle. So I'm going to change this up just a little bit. I'm now going to graph for you quickly a cosine function, and just to show you the difference between the two. So that does it for the sine function. Now we're going to go ahead and do the cosine function. Now I'm going to basically leave everything as it is, because in terms of the cosine function, there's not a whole lot that changes. So the only thing I'm going to change in this case for you guys is the fact that this is cos rather than sine. So now we're graphing a cosine function. So what can we expect when we go to graph a cosine function? So let me just delete these to show you guys how to do it from the beginning. And that way we have a solid foundation for any trig relationship. So this is my axes here. I want to do my best, guys. I know it's a bit messy. Don't have the best handwriting, but it'll do. So again, every variable stays the same. Wow, that's wonderful, Mr. Tam. 3 pi over 2, which leads me to the period being 2 pi over b. And that is 2 pi divided by pi over 2, which is 4. My h is still -2, and my k is -1. Wonderful. The only thing I forgot to do here is the a times b. And let's do that right away. Now in this case, a times b still, because I haven't changed it, is still a times b is greater than 0. But in a cosine function, it serves a slightly different purpose, or it behaves a little differently. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to find -1, and I'm going to draw a horizontal dotted line to show you where my function starts to split. And then, as we did earlier, that's the first thing we take care of. Then we go back to -2, which is where it all starts, and we draw a vertical line. So this is number 2, taking care of that. The period is defined as 4, which means it's going to go forward 1, 2, 3, 4, still to be ended at 2. And last but not least, for A, we end up at 3, the amplitude being 3, meaning from the K you count 3 upwards and you count 3 downwards. So we have pretty much the same box. So you're saying, sir, what's the difference? Well, the difference is this. When you multiply your a times b in a sine function, if the a times b gives you a positive number, you are going up or increasing. In a cosine, it acts in the opposite direction. Also, where you have the h, rather than start in the middle, you're starting at either a maximum or a minimum. In this case, because it's decreasing from h, we know that h has to be at a max. So it ends up being at the top here, and we're going to go by quarters yet again. So if we know it's decreasing, it means it reaches this point by the first quarter, it reaches the bottom by the second quarter, it reaches back to the K by the third quarter, and last but not least ends up in the same spot it's going to start at, because it is cyclical, which means your graph looks something like this. If your a times b was negative, then you would start at the minimum and then start to go up, reaching the peak in the middle, and then all the way back down until you get to that last intersection point there. So I'm hoping this guy's helped you out. Please like this video and subscribe. Turn on your notifications so that you know whenever I publish a new video. I hope that this guys can help you out during these troubled times. So wishing you all the best, safety to your family, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.